Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Let's get after it.
Free energy. This guy, Maxwell Chikumbutsu from Zimbabwe, he created a generator that does not use any power source. So this generator creates free energy using frequencies from the atmosphere. This one generator can power 300 homes. These two scientist guys went out there to test it, and they're like, yeah, it's legit. And they're like, how did you know how to build this? And he says when he sleeps, he gets revelations from God of how to create these things. He says, this is how he told me to make it. But this dude has a target on his back. So he's been in prison in Zimbabwe multiple times.
You're too smart.
He came to the US at one point and he was poisoned and almost died. And he cannot get any of his patents patented because if it defies physics, it cannot be patented.
Imagine if everything goes black in the world and that's the only type of energy source that we can holster.
Yeah, that's also a thing that AI couldn't affect.
Definitely not.
Is that true that if it defies physics, because you would think that they would allow you to patent anything as long as it works, whether it defies physics or not. If you have a working prototype, I would think you'd be able to patent it. This is another one of those that I'll believe it whenever I see it. This guy from Zimbabwe, where is the free energy device? Where's the video footage of it working and powering all these homes?
Whether you believe in the mysterious moon matrix theory or not, please watch this video carefully, as it might overturn your understanding of the entire world. In 2001, British author David Icke used math and geometry to study the moon's volume and position, came to a startling conclusion, that the moon is actually a transmission device called the moon matrix, made up of 12 machines by a higher civilization. Its frequency waves severely disrupt human consciousness and perception, imprisoning us within the 3D Earth and limiting our cognitive leap. This is to prevent humans from discovering the truth of our world. Then Icke also points out astronomical anomalies that defy explanation, and you realize that the existence of the moon may not be as simple as we think. For example, during a total solar eclipse, why can the moon, who is so much smaller than the sun, can perfectly cover it? According to astronomical data, the sun's diameter is about 1.39 million kilometers, while the moon's is only 3,400 kilometers, a 395-fold difference. Coincidentally, the sun is about 150 million kilometers from Earth, and the moon is 380,000 kilometers away, also a 395-fold difference. It's as if the moon's size was precisely calculated, and the precise control of the distance between the Earth and the moon is even more creepy. Moreover, while the moon is constantly spinning, it's also constantly rotating. Amazingly, both the moon's rotation period and its revolution period are both 27.3 days. Due to tidal locking, one side of the moon always faces Earth, which prevents us here on Earth from ever seeing the moon in its entirety. Tidal locking not only affects Earth's tilt and rotation, but also the tides of our oceans. Since 70% of the human body is water, does this mean the moon directly influences human behavior? And finally, the most incomprehensible of all is the Roche limit, is when a small massive body is approaching a large massive body. At a limiting distance, it will be torn apart by its massive tidal forces, and eventually break up. It's the celestial warning line. Any small body below this distance would be torn apart and potentially form planetary rings. Since there's a minimum distance to keep celestial bodies in orbit, there's also a maximum distance known as the Hill sphere, which means that a satellite's orbit must be within the planet's Hill sphere, or else it's out of the planet's gravity. For the moon to be Earth's satellite, it must be between these two distances. But what's amazing is that the Earth-Moon Lose limit is about 13,500 kilometers. Earth-Moon Hill sphere is 1.5 million kilometers, although the moon could orbit anywhere within that range, but chose 380,000 kilometers that would be the perfect distance to create a total eclipse of the sun. As Earth's satellite, the moon is unusually large, over a quarter the size of Earth and even larger than Pluto, whereas the largest satellite in our solar system, Ganymede, is only about 1/27th the size of Jupiter. That's why many people think the moon was purposely placed around the Earth. According to Icke's moon matrix theory, our universe is a complex dimensional space, and humans, limited by our cognitive abilities, can only perceive 3 dimensions. Higher beings have always been around us, and our illusions, even supernatural phenomena, are events from a higher dimensional world. To prevent us from discovering the truth, a higher civilization created the moon matrix to manipulate and regulate the thoughts and lives of Earth's creatures, even sealing the pineal gland, believed to be our third eye, preventing us from using our sixth sense to perceive the world. As astronomer Robin Brett once said, it's easier to explain why the moon doesn't exist than why it does. Its size and distance create the perfect conditions for life on Earth, leading to the birth of human civilization. But if we think differently, can we really be sure that before humans appeared, there were no other higher civilizations on Earth?
This one's a pretty intriguing theory that the moon was placed there by some higher civilization in the past. I don't believe it. Going back to the beginning of that clip when the guy's talking about there's 12 machines inside the moon, how exactly would he know that there's a machine in there at all other than theorizing, and how would he come to determine that there's exactly 12 machines, and what is the purpose of these 12 machines? Why are there 12 of them? There's just too many questions unanswered.
There's this myth of this ancient city in India called Dwarka. Supposedly this city was just highly technologically advanced. There was 900,000 royal palaces made from crystal and silver. Just this immaculate giant city, right?
Yeah.
But there was another rival city. There was a war that happened. One city had ships that sailed in the air. They would shoot lightning down into the city, and then the people of Dwarka said that they were shooting lightning back. And then shortly after this war, the whole place was flooded and lost forever. So they found it.
They found it?
Yeah, Dwarka, it said that it was built off of 6 stones.
Yeah.
They described them in such a unique way. They found off the coast of India these 6 stones that fit the description perfectly. And
That's awesome.
they found like coins that they carbon dated like over 11,000 years ago, and like all this crazy architecture. They're like starting to discover more and more the deeper they dug. India basically is like, no more. So they like cut all funding.
Do we want to go to the moon? We can't be funding this anymore.
Yeah, we
Maybe
need to-
they found technology to get them to the moon.
Or there was a message saying, go to the moon.
Get out of here.
That sounds like hogwash. I haven't heard anything about the secret city that was supposedly found, and I haven't even heard anything about that city. Could just be that I'm out of the loop. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. And for them to say, oh, there's this secret city that everyone's been looking for, even though it's not common knowledge, and oh, we found it, it just seems too convenient. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, I make a new one just like it every single day. It would be awesome if you'd hit that subscribe button and come back to join me tomorrow.
Check this video out because they just found the ancient remains of Noah and his family. Let's go ahead and play it.
They know to be Noah's ancient home. And the reason they know this is because there's a marker outside of these ruins. It's a giant stone with an inscription of a rainbow. Underneath the rainbow is a ship with animals coming off of it. And then there are 8 carved crosses representing 8 people that came off of the ark. And this was taken from a site that was a dug-up grave at those ancient ruins of Noah's home.
And those are the finger bones.
That is one single finger, and this is a
Wow.
regular-sized woman's hand next to the finger, so that gives you an idea of how large that person's hand had to be.
Was this Mrs. Noah's finger?
It is believed that this was the grave of Mrs. Noah, and
Okay.
that is Mrs. Noah's finger.
And her name would have been Joan of Arc.
Right.
Yeah, okay. What is this bone here now? This is a thumb bone?
This is a thumb bone. Now, this is not connected to the Noah's Ark location. This was taken from another place in the Middle East, but that's an example, that's a real bone of how large somebody's thumb was, and you can see it in comparison next to Mary's thumb. It's a lot larger. This toe bone has been examined by multiple actual scientists. None of them are willing to come out and say publicly that this is a toe bone because of backlash from the community. But every one of them said undeniably 100% this is a human toe bone.
It's a toe bone.
But see, the guy would have to be 15 feet tall to have a toe.
He would. Yeah, and that's sitting in the palm of my hand. I have a pretty big hand, as you can see. That's in the palm of it. So that person would have to be easily 12 to 14 feet tall. And not only would their bones have to be longer, but they would have to be wider to sustain that much weight.
Sure, but it was a different world back then. We know there were giant reptiles. We find the bones all over dinosaurs. They find fossil cockroaches 2 feet long. They find fossil dragonflies, 2-foot wingspan. Fossil grasshoppers 2 feet long. Why can they admit there was giant everything else and can't admit there were giant humans?
It would prove the scripture as a truth.
Where are the photos of this supposed stone that was marking the area that had all these images of animals being brought off an ark and the family members and all this stuff inscribed on it? Why wouldn't they show that picture? It is interesting, though, to see the vast difference in scale of these skeletons that they found. It's cool to think if the Bible stories are true, these people really existed. They apparently are not the same size as us. So, like, whenever you're picturing the flood and stuff, that ark would have had to been a lot larger because it's carrying a lot bigger people. And if the people are bigger, probably the animals are bigger than they are now.
This one gets weird. This is the San Galgano Abbey in Tuscany, and inside it is the actual sword in the stone. That is right, it is real. The University of Pavia has carbon dated the sword to the mid-1100s, which fits perfectly. Radar revealed the full sword, and it sits inside here, underneath that plastic case. The penetrator of this rock was none other than Gogano Guidari, a Catholic saint. The knights of the time then used this story to integrate the legend of Odin, Anthony Hopkins, into the culture under the church's nose. So Guidari created this King Arthur story to tell that story. Here's where it starts to get weird. Arthur comes from Arctur, a very huge star that is aligned with the Arctic Circle. In Norse mythology, the ice giants created a network of hinges to open the door for their people to live. At the time, the Earth had barely any ice and was ruled by snakes. The homeland of the giants was Hyperborea. We learned from the Greeks is the dead center of the Arctic Circle. Mr. Godati was a knight, and he loved his worldly pleasures. But the Lord gave him a vision and said the only way he's going to get to heaven is if he renounces those. He replies, "Until my sword goes through the stone like butter, I'm not doing that." So the sword goes through the stone like butter, and he becomes a monk. But the knights typically expose the dark side of the church. That's why they're executed. The real sword is here, stuck in the obelisk from Egypt. The empire had plucked the all-seeing third eye from Egypt. Odin also sacrificed one of his eyes for the ability to see. The black cube is the stone. The Catholics hid theirs in the unfolded cube. The cube has always represented Earth. That is because the Earth is flat. I'm kidding, it's not flat. The crystals we see on Earth form cubical lattice. Monotheism had the task of splitting alchemy into spirituality and the sciences. We are in the age of removing the sword from the stone, claiming the individual's role as king instead of the empire. At least that's what the legend says.
That was interesting, if anything. Not sure how historically accurate all that is, but I thought it was interesting to see the sword in the stone, and because we've all heard the story of the sword in the stone, to see that there is a sword in a stone somewhere, that historical story or fable or tale is based off of. I just thought that was pretty fascinating.
I believe most of the mud was already there. Just look at this example of soil liquefaction. That is when the ground vibrates at a certain frequency that can cause it to literally liquefy and can swallow up entire cars, buildings, trees in such short speed, completely changing the landscape. Now look at in modern times here, an example in one of the earthquakes in Indonesia, what it did to the entire city there. The mud became so liquefied there that it became basically a river carrying houses right on down with it. Now imagine in a larger example, a realm-wide example, a massive earthquake and cataclysmic event that caused a chain reaction that liquefied the ground beneath our feet, caused most of the buildings to be destroyed. Some, with liquefaction, sank several meters below the ground. And I think the evidence of this cataclysmic event can be found worldwide, in every town and nearly every city, buried in sunken structures. I think we just did the best we could to salvage what was left after this cataclysmic event. Question everything, friends. Until next time.
That one was pretty good. It kind of makes me wonder, we've all seen the photos online where they dig up these graves of people that were from thousands of years ago, and they're laying in like odd positioning, almost as if they were buried alive. This almost makes me wonder if that would explain some of that. Maybe some of these people passed in a mud flood. Maybe not necessarily the mud flood, but as we can see, they happen quite often.
So above me is alleged footage of the 1893 Chicago World Fair. Now these World Fairs were put on all over the United States, but there's a lot of mystery surrounding them. The architecture, the technology seemed way too advanced for the time. Many compared it to that of Roman architecture and culture, but then after they were done, they literally burnt them to the ground. So many theorists believe that this architecture was already here, and it was from a previous civilization. Now I want you to look at this video and look at it closely. Look at the height of the people in this video. Notice how tall they are. Now I've always been told that the people were shorter back then. In fact, much shorter, like 5'8" or less. Well, some of the people in this video, especially the men, the soldiers, are much taller than that. You can just tell by looking at them. Their averages of 6 foot plus, maybe even taller, 6'4". Look at that man. And look at how long their legs are, their stride. Very tall. And they get even taller as it goes. Even the women standing on the sideline, they look generally pretty tall. Which begs the question, who are these people and where are they from? And just wait, it gets even better. Look at that gentleman right here. Look how tall he is. Even him, especially him. Could these be potentially the Tartarians? Tall. These people are plus 6'4" and up. Right here, look at that gentleman. Could this be the previous civilization that actually built the structures that were at the Chicago World Fair and the World Fairs all over the United States? Then they toppled it over so we wouldn't remember the previous civilizations and taught us a different history. That's what some believe.
What made these fairs so mysterious was the fact that they went to such great lengths to build these colossal structures and these ornate pieces in a really fast turnover. We're talking the Chicago World Fair was 700 acres of exposition built in allegedly just 2 years to last for just 6 months, and then they pretty much completely demolished them when they were done. The St. Louis World Fair was 1,200 acres, supposedly built in 3 years. The buildings were like nothing we have today. This one you see behind me was the manufacturer's building built in Chicago. It housed 300,000 people, y'all. Now, to put that in perspective, the Big House at U of M houses the most people out of any college football stadium in the nation. And it only houses 110,000. You're talking 3 times that in this building.
How'd they do it? What type of technology did they have access to? Sacred geometry, a technology that's been hidden from us that we have no idea actually exists? Or had all that architecture and those structures been here for hundreds, possibly even thousands of years from a previous civilization? A civilization that was much more advanced than we are today, or had access to technologies that we're not being allowed access to. It's hard not to think there's more to the story going on here. So I was able to locate this on the internet. It's a alleged ticket to the World Fair. But doesn't this look more like an ID to you? Look at the descriptions: height, eye color, hair color, sex, all the above. It looks like a form of identification. Now, why would a ticket to the World Fair look like an ID? Also, take a look at this. This is supposedly a crowd that was at the World Fair. Where's all the tall people I showed you from the previous video? And why is every single person wearing the exact same hat? They look almost out of place. It's almost as if they don't belong or are out of their element. Don't know what to think about the entire situation. And then there's pictures like this of people stacked on top of electric train cars. Literally millions of people pouring in all at the same time. Now, of course, this is just for entertainment purposes only. It's just going outside of the box, thinking unconventionally. But could they be adult orphans? And if so, where did they come from and why? And then, what happened to the previous civilization? The one that I believe is in that video. But there's a legend or a story that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years ago, an evil alien race stumbled upon Earth. At the time, we weren't near as advanced, so they took it over. And they acquired a taste for human flesh. So they took over and they let us inhabit the Earth, only to farm us every so many thousand years. They give us bits of technology. They allow us to advance, but only to a certain degree. And how are they getting away with this, you might ask? Well, it's supposedly because we're in a corner of the galaxy that is unwatched by the Galactic Federation. So I'm not saying this is true at all, you guys, but it's just a cool spin on the entire story. Like, what could have happened to that civilization? Was there a reaping? They consumed or farmed the previous race of Tartarian descendants, took their children, maybe underground, and those orphan adults that we were seeing are those being brought back to Earth to repopulate. Hence the beautiful buildings, hence all of the gorgeous architecture and structures, the technology. They couldn't leave the buildings because if they left them, as we grew, or as the adult orphans had kids and grew, they would question where these buildings came from, how they were built, why can't we build them if they're here? So, in order to get rid of all that, they showed them human potential and then reset it.
This guy's theory has so many holes in it. And I know there would be no way for him to confirm his theory. So it's kind of not fair to sit here and make fun of, but it's so far-fetched. It's just really easy. There's so much low-hanging fruit. You know, if the Tartarians are supposed to be this massive giant race, the people he's pointing out in those videos don't look like giants. They look like your average taller than normal person that you see walking around at Walmart. And adult orphans. That the Tartarian thing, like, I find it very interesting. My big problem is with the World's Fair aspect of it is that we have people around now who lived with relatives who had direct firsthand accounts of that period of time. So I feel like there would be a lot more stories and a lot more myths out there from your normal average person passing down stories they had heard from grandpa and whatnot. The World's Fair thing, I think, is just reaching, but that's just my opinion. We'll keep watching stuff on it. Something might change my mind.
Respectant le plus difficile de la construction était le piédestal, une que le statut soit destiné à être universel. L'ambassadeur des États-Unis nous a exhortés à suivre les démons du président Trump. Nous avons accepté l'échappement. Nous avons reçu des exigences de taille variable pour le piédestal. Après 4 ans, les demandes de modification de la taille du piédestal ont cessé. Les gens se demandent pourquoi le piédestal est tellement plus grand que le reste. Tout ce que je veux dire, c'est demander aux Américains.
Ellie Island era orribile. L'intero posto puzzava di carne, come un mattatoio. C'erano anche uccelli morti ovunque e mia sorella ne trovò persino uno nel gabinetto. Se già la costa è così, diceva mio padre, immaginate quanto puzzeranno le città. Ricordo di aver sentito altre famiglie dire quasi scherzosamente che volessero tornare a Milano per via dell'odore. La mia famiglia aveva spruzzato profumo e acceso candele per tenere lontano il fetore, ma funzionava solo per un'ora o giù di lì, finché l'aria diventava di nuovo insopportabile. Le serate erano così calde, rimasi per lo più sveglia, anche se il resto della mia famiglia dormiva profondamente. Ricordo che guardavo fuori dalla finestra ogni notte e vedevo figli di persone che venivano condotte alla Statua della Libertà dai funzionari. Se solo fossero saliti sul piedistallo, i funzionari se ne sarebbero andati e non sarebbe successo nient'altro. La mattina seguente però ci sarebbe stato un odore peggiore, come un mattatoio.
Now, this is one I had never heard about before. It seems a little crazy. Let me know in the comments, because I never heard of this theory before. I've never heard of this, the possibility that we were bringing in immigrants and then doing away with them. So let me know down in the comments if this is something y'all have heard about before, and if there's any more information out there that you could point me in the direction of, because this is pretty interesting.
Lloyd Pye pointed out this really weird thing about humans. Humans have 46 chromosomes and all primates have 48. All primates on Earth.
I didn't know that.
Every single primate has 48 chromosomes. It has to do with packages of DNA, basically. What they found within the human Homo sapiens sapien was that there was something within our DNA where parts of it had been like altered. What they call those alterations and those things that scientists don't know, they call it junk DNA. Because when they compared every other comparable thing on Earth genetically, they found this small little area within our genetics that doesn't match anything on the planet.
That's pretty interesting that we have junk DNA in our human Homo sapiens sapien DNA. I wonder what the explanation for that is. It kind of would imply that we were genetically altered at some point in the past.
This is crazy. This guy literally just found evidence of the Bible outside of the Bible. Let's go ahead and play it.
So here we are in the Egyptian Museum. This is the Merneptah stele. So on this side is the most famous name found in this entire inscription, which is right down here, the name Israel. It's agreed upon that this says Israel, and this is the earliest mention of the name Israel found outside of the Bible. The inscription of Merneptah dates to around 1210 BC. The inscription describes who Merneptah and his army fought with in Canaan. The translation reads, Canaan is plundered, Ashkelon is conquered, Gezer is seized, Yanoam is made non-existent, Israel is laid waste. Ashkelon, Gezer, and Yanoam are followed by the city-state symbol. These three city-states were ruled by kings. There is no city-state symbol shown for the name Israel. Instead, the symbol for a foreign people is shown. This means that in 1210 BC, Israel is described as a people that has not yet formed into a nation and therefore is without a king. According to biblical chronology, the date 1210 BC falls in the Judges period, where we find in the book of Judges this repeating phrase, in those days, Israel had no king. This is yet another example of the details in the Bible being verified through the details of an inscription dug up through archaeology.
I don't feel like this proves anything in the Bible other than there's a lot of accurate historical references in the Bible. Of course, it's going to depict accurate things that are happening in the time that it's written. People are going to write about what they know, write about what's going on around them, knowing that there's other historical documents from the time that back up something as minuscule as this place exists and they don't have a king. It's not like that proves everything that's in Scripture. For lack of a better word, I'm just playing devil's advocate there.
You know what the darkest conspiracy theory about aliens is?
I don't know if I'm ready for it.
That Earth is essentially a farm, and human beings are the vessels that contain souls, and they want us because this is how they create souls. They farm us. And that the whole reason why human beings are involved in this conflict, constant conflict, it's all of it is to increase our competition with each other, increase our ability to control resources, which will increase our technology, which will ultimately lead to us creating this being that we're going to create, this artificially intelligent super god, which is going to happen. I'm not saying it please. I'm just saying that this is like top of the food chain, put your tinfoil hat on super tight. People are going to merge with machines. It's going to happen in our life.
You think?
100%. 100%. They're already working on it. The doorway to it is going to be helping people with neurological conditions, injuries, spinal cord injuries. People can't move their bones, or they can't move their muscles correctly.
This one terrifies the hell out of me because you know it's coming. There's so much good that's going to come from that, and that's why there's going to be early adopters, because there's so many people who need that technology. But then when it switches over to the people who just want the technology for the benefits that it can bring, I feel like our civilization is going to be over. At least the human-driven aspect of this earth is going to be gone, and we're going to be left in the dirt. What's going to be left is not even going to care about our history. So, it's odd we sit here and dig through these videos trying to piece together the lies and things that have been told to us so that we can find the truth. And before long, AI is going to take over and we won't even be here. And they don't care about what our history is. I'm going to leave it there on that good note. That's the end of this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed the clips that I put together. I hope everyone out there is having a fantabulous day. And I will see you in the next one. See you tomorrow.